If we look at the four most popular focal lengths for both photo and video, we've got the 24, 35, 50, and 85. And the 24mm lens is often the hardest to make, and it is generally the most expensive. And that's why this new lens by 7 Artisans, I think, is so critically important. And when we compare it to the first-party offerings, the Sony lens is about 4 times the price, the comparable Nikon lens is 3 times the price, and the comparable Lumix offering is almost 3 times the price. So 7 Artisans is going to allow people to access a 24mm focal length with a large maximum aperture at a price point that previously wasn't possible. In full disclosure, this lens was sent out to me at no cost to myself, but this is not a paid or sponsored video. I'll put some links in the description down below to the best pricing I could find on the lens and any discount codes I happen to know about. At the time of shooting this video, it's only available on one lens mount, but there are 2 more to come, and those links in the description will automatically update when the new lens mounts are released. And I think this lens is going to be an absolute favorite for travel, event photography, environmental portraits, YouTube videos. This is an extremely versatile lens, and it is basically what they consider the standard wide lens. Importantly, while this is a full frame lens, 24mm on an APS-C sensor camera is going to be around a 38mm field of view, and that is equally useful on APS-C sensor cameras. And all the videos you see me shoot on this channel now are shot on an APS-C sensor camera using the 24mm focal length, also at f1.8. And one of the first things that comes to mind as a use for this lens is environmental portraits. 24mm is absolutely perfect for environmental portraits. Now, this is not a shot where you're going to get very close to the subject, because 24mm, when you get too close to a person, will distort their features. But starting from about waist level and above, or even back to full body length shots, environmental portraits with this lens are going to allow you to capture a person, make them look reasonably normal and natural, but also capture a wide environment wrapping around them. This is also going to be great for things like tracking shots in video. And the next thing I think about this lens for is landscape photography. This is a nice standard wide angle field of view, which is a great starting point for landscape photography. Now, this is very different than an ultra wide angle lens. An ultra wide angle lens is going to be great for those really crazy wraparound environments like forests and caves. This is not going to give you that complete wraparound image, but what this is going to do is it is going to be a lot easier for you to compose moving image with, because we have a little bit narrower field of view. So we have a little bit less to think about in the frame. And I think for landscape photographers or somebody new to wide angle landscape, 24mm is an excellent starting point. And I think it kind of falls into the same category for architecture and real estate. Once again, 24mm is going to vary a very standard wide angle field of view. 24mm is not going to give you that crazy look that you often see in real estate photography, where you see a photo and you see, oh, this room looks huge and magnificent. And then you go to visit the property, whether it be a hotel room or something on Airbnb, and you find it is way smaller than it looks. A 24mm lens is going to make that environment or that room look reasonably natural. The other thing that this lens is going to be great for is street photography. I see this mainly as what I call a lonely figure style of street photography, and that's where you generally have to take your time, but you find a nice built crazy environment, and then you wait till you just have one person in the scene and you're sort of hanging way back. Then you get the buildings and all the built environment around them, but you only see this one lonely figure. This is a very specific style of street photography. I also think it's quite a low stress style of street photography. Now, if you want to use it in more of the traditional way where you get close on someone, it is going to allow you to get a picture of a person and have a nice wraparound environment around them, really give some context to the environment that they're in. But you're going to have to get quite close if you're going to get a more traditional style of street photography photo. But it might be good for things like markets or crowded environments where a 35mm or a 50mm lens would just be too cropped in. This would allow you to sort of capture some photos in those tighter environments. The other thing this lens is going to be crazy popular for is vlogging, handheld video, as well as YouTube or content creation. And I use a 24mm f1.8 to shoot all my videos. So it is a virtually perfect focal length, and it works equally well on APS-C sensor cameras or full frame cameras. And on a full frame camera, it's going to allow you to put your camera in a position where you can just reach with your hand and hit record. If you're shooting on an APS-C sensor camera like I am for this video, it's going to be a little bit further away, but it's also going to give you a little bit more of a natural look. And if you do have a full frame camera that has crop sensor mode, this gives you both options in one. And I very well could shoot this video on a full frame camera and just go into crop sensor mode if this is the look that I wanted. The other thing this lens could be great for is astrophotography. 24 millimeters is a nice wide field of view for that. f1.8 is going to allow a lot of light in. So I think for star trails, night skies, or even night time lapses, this could be an absolutely perfect lens for that. The other thing I could see this useful for is event and wedding photography. It's going to be great for establishing shots where you're getting the whole room and all the people in, or you're getting the historic building or the church or something like that. But you can also use it when you want to get in close. Maybe you're getting dance floor shots, or you're up close on the action. Once again, it's a lens that's not going to give people too much distortion if you don't get too close, but also it's going to be a nice wide lens for those establishing shots as well. Now, I just want to talk about perspective distortion and the 24 millimeter focal length. Unlike something like 20 or 15, where you get a significant amount of what is called perspective distortion, the 24 is actually quite versatile as far as perspective distortion goes. And so perspective distortion is not a fault of the lens or anything wrong with the design of the lens. Perspective distortion is something you get when you get close to someone or an object with a wide angle lens. And what happens is with a wide angle lens, it pushes the background further away and it allows that thing that's close to the lens to be more prominent in the frame. The great thing about a 24 millimeter lens is it's extremely flexible in using this effect. So if you want to get an image that has some interesting perspective distortion, you just need to get up close on the object and you're just automatically going to get it. And then you just kind of think about your composition, how that background and how the foreground are relating to each other, or how the subject and the background are relating to each other. If you don't get too close to subjects and you just hang back a little bit, you won't get any perspective distortion at all. So I like this particularly for beginning photographers because it allows you to play with that perspective distortion. Unlike wider lenses where you're kind of locked into dealing with perspective distortion all the time, a lens like this is going to kind of be a two-speed lens. Get up close on something, use perspective distortion, back off a little bit, have a very natural, normal-looking image. And although the lens is a budget lens, it doesn't feel like a budget lens by any means. You've got an all-metal body, you've got a polished metal lens mount, you have a USB-C port for updating the firmware, you have aperture control on the lens, you have an autofocus manual focus switch, and you have a programmable button. You also have a nice well-dampened manual focus ring. The lens comes with a plastic lens hood, which works quite well, and it comes with a pinch-on plastic lens cap. Now, the lens I've got came with a pre-release firmware, and because of that, the in-body image stabilization isn't actually syncing with the camera, so it's not telling the right focal length. You have to go in and manually do that. There's been a few YouTubers that have reported that's the case for them as well. Just want to let you know that that will be resolved in firmware. My copy actually works quite well when I put it into active stabilization or if I manually input the focal length. Now, a little quirk this lens has right now when bringing the images into Lightroom, if you haven't disabled the corrections in camera, it will force some of those corrections even on the raw files in Lightroom, and you can't disable it. So you can't even go untick the box. And a few of the reviews I saw really made me think that some of the reviewers actually were having corrections happen in Lightroom, though they didn't notice it. The distortion performance is an interesting one because if you leave the images uncorrected, you get this crazy mustache distortion pattern in your images, which is very, very hard to correct. And what I found is if I turned on the in-camera corrections, even in the raw files in Lightroom, it gave me a modest amount of barrel distortion, which was actually reasonably easy to correct in Lightroom. So what I would suggest is turn on the in-camera corrections. That will correct your raw files to an extent, and then in Lightroom you can finish the correction and have nice even lines. The area that's most affected is just at the edge of frame anyway, so if you get some wavy lines at the edge of frame, you can just crop in a little bit and that will get rid of those. But if you turn on the in-camera corrections and just do a slight correction of the barrel distortion, you're going to get a good result. Now, the lens exhibits extremely heavy vignette performance starting from f1.8. It does improve as you stop it down, but it doesn't go away completely. And if you try to correct this in Lightroom, it is very, very difficult because how heavy the vignette is. But if you turn on corrections in the camera for the vignette, it does reduce that vignette enough that makes it easy to correct in Lightroom. So what I would suggest as far as vignette performance, leave on the in-camera corrections and then finish the correction once you bring it into editing. Looking at the chromatic aberration performance, I found it to be exceptionally clean in the in-focus areas. I really didn't see any purple fringing whatsoever. Little to none, I would say. A little bit once you got to the corners, but for the most part, I thought this was an extremely clean performance, particularly for a lens at this price point. The longitudinal chromatic aberration performance, which is a change in color cast in the areas before and after the plane of focus, was reasonably strong, and it was quite noticeable on test charts from f1.8. f2.8 was a little bit better, f4 was much better, but I found it was not an issue in any of my real world shots, and unless you were shooting a black and white sign on an angle where you would see this, then I don't think it's something that I would even worry about. The flare performance on the lens was excellent, even pointing into straight, bright points of light. You got a little bit of streak across the lens, kind of looked nice, like something out of a nice cinematic movie or something out of a high quality cinema lens. I wouldn't say it was absolutely perfect, like a Sigma or Sony performance, but it was definitely very good, and it was certainly one of the better performances I've ever seen out of a third-party lens, particularly at this price point. The minimum focus distance on the lens was not fantastic, and the close-up image quality was just so-so. I wouldn't consider it a lens for close-up and detail shots. Once you stop it down, it was acceptable, but it's not a lens that I would think of as a pseudo-macro lens or that I would use for many close-up images. When it comes to sharpness, I was surprised at how sharp the lens was, particularly in the center of frame right from f1.8. It wasn't razor sharp, but it was certainly very sharp, and it was acceptably sharp. As you stop it down, it does get slightly better, and you get a little bit more contrast, but I found it was reasonably sharp throughout the whole range, and I didn't find there was a massive difference going from f1.8 all the way down to f11. The corner sharpness is a little bit of a different story. From f1.8, it's definitely softer in the corners than it is in the center, and there's also a hint of chromatic aberration. I think f2 is about the same. f2.8 is noticeably sharper with very little chromatic aberration, and from f4 it's very good, as are f5.6 all the way through f11. So I think if you're worried about corner sharpness, I would shoot it from f4 on. I think generally speaking, if you want to get a deep depth of field and you want everything in focus and you are worried about those corners, you're probably going to be shooting it from f4 on anyways. I found the bokeh balls to be reasonably round and pleasing. Many of them did have an interesting color outline. I wish that color outline was a little bit more defined, because then it would have been more of a bubble bokeh effect, but it was kind of just a glow around specular highlights. I didn't think this was necessarily good or bad, and it's just a matter of personal preference, but I wouldn't say that the bokeh performance was necessarily clinical. I found that the general out of focus areas looked very good, smooth, and pleasing. I didn't really notice any of that longitudinal chromatic aberration that affected the test charts, so the general out of focus areas were great, and I would say borderline perfect. I think this is a great new release by 7 Artisans. I think it is going to sell like crazy, and although I don't think it's optically perfect, when you compare it to the alternatives that are 3 to 4 times the price, those lenses definitely aren't 3 or 4 times better, and it's going to allow somebody who could really use a fast maximum aperture 24mm lens and give them access to it when they really couldn't afford it otherwise. And although it's a full frame lens, because of the price point and the reasonably small size, I think this is a lens that somebody is currently only shooting on an APS-C sensor camera could buy and know that if they do upgrade to full frame in the future, it's going to be usable on that camera as well. Buying a new lens is only one way to improve the quality of your photo and videos, but you can do it right now for free without leaving your house. I've just thrown a video on screen now. This is the best tutorial I have ever done on photography, and if you watch that video to the end, I'd be very surprised if you aren't a better photographer at the end of that video than you are right now.